John, people are noticing that you seem displeased with Bill Gates at the gates of hell. How are you feeling tonight, John?
I feel all right, but I'm kind of concerned about the ironing of the shirt.
Oh,
Rarely will you see me leave a house with a shirt that's this.
disheveled. Well, let
Yeah.
me just give a few disclaimers before we get underway. First of all, this is not actually a picture of John. This is some guy who was in a meeting with Bill Gates that I stuck John's head on because the guy looks kind of displeased and Bill Gates looks like a dope. And also to clarify, Bill Gates will not be on the show tonight. This is going to be John recounting a story about the third encounter with Bill Gates. It's also not a close encounter of the third kind. So if people wanted aliens or actual Bill Gates,
It's
this is the
close.
wrong
It's
show.
close. Yeah, but this is close. It is close,
Yeah.
metaphorically speaking.
Yeah. And then we're going to go into some detail on this meeting during the sponsor exclusive show, which people can see in about 30 minutes on subscribestar.com/IamJohnCullen, patreon.com/IamJohnCullen, and subscribestar.com and patreon.com/crowdsource the truth. You know, John, we were under strike last week, so a lot of people did not get to see last week's show. I hope that people will subscribe to the John E. Hoover YouTube channel. That is an excellent way to stay current on all of John's videos. You can also see the simulcasts of our Friday shows there. John E. Hoover YouTube channel on YouTube, totally free, an excellent value for $0, right?
Can't get more for less, right?
Wait a minute. I have something new for you.
Ooh.
So this is perhaps, I tried it during David Hawkins' show, but I screwed it up a little bit. I've been using this new Twitter alternative Getter. Damn it. Well, it's not working. It's supposed to be live on Getter, but for some reason, I don't know why we're not. Well, sorry about that.
That's okay. We've got news on this on this thread that we'll get to tonight in tonight's show. But we've got a really having to do with Twitter and Getter and all that. But we've got a big show. There's going to be a huge reveal tonight on our patron only show. So for the patrons of Crowdsource the Truth and patrons of the I Am John Cullen channels at Patreon and Subscribestar, you guys are going to get to hear something tonight that's a pretty big revelation, I think. So and that's about about Bill Gates and me and our third crossing of paths, I would call it. This wasn't a meeting, but this was our paths crossed. And we're going to talk tonight. I'll recap for those of you who are not familiar with the first two times. I'll recap that a little bit. And then we're going to, with our patrons, talk about this third incarnation and what happened.
I'll figure out what's going wrong with Getter. Like I said, I just found out about it today and started trying to use it, so it's not 100%. But I do want to recommend that people subscribe to Crowdsource the Truth on Odyssey. That is a good way to follow the simulcasts. The other thing that's great about the Crowdsource the Truth channel on Odyssey, John, is that it's got so many of the older videos. A lot of people are always asking me, hey, where can I see all those, older videos that have gotten decimated by so many social engineers? Oh, there's one right now. But it's a great way for people to stay on top of all this material now that the First Amendment is kind of like a figment of our imagination. What are we going to be getting into tonight on the sponsor exclusive segment, John?
Well, I prepared a couple of slides. First of all, Bill Gates has a role in both this virus pandemic story, right, and vaccinations and all that. He was one of the first people that everybody turned to as an expert. And one of the early phenomenon that we saw was a Bill Gates lecture at TED
Yeah.
somehow made a resurgence in January of 2020. And Bill Gates almost became the the spokesperson for pandemic preparedness or what have you.
Yeah.
So he kind of got himself into this is kind of the point here. I'm not dragging him into this pandemic story. He was kind of front and center.
Hmm.
But what many people may not be aware of is that Bill Gates was also a character, a player in the Las Vegas shooting story. Now, you have to understand the details of the Las Vegas shooting to understand, well, how does Bill Gates factor into that?
Right, because he never came up in the mainstream news reporting. Nobody mentioned him at
Correct.
all relative to Las Vegas.
Correct. And so that that in and of itself is an important bit of evidence, right? So the saying that I have that everything is evidence of something, right?
Yeah.
So the fact that Bill Gates was never mentioned, but even more important, the fact that the Four Seasons was never mentioned. And that was the big factor. It was all Mandalay Bay, and maybe Delano. But never did they mention the Four Seasons. And it wasn't until we analyzed that footage of 9:47 p.m. that we realized something may have been happening up at the Four Seasons that was untoward.
But that was
And
an
then when
amazing
we
find. Just recap
well,
for people. We don't have the footage necessarily ready, but you, John, located a looks like a shotgun blast coming out of the window almost an hour before anything happened.
somebody pointed it out to me. Again, this is the whole crowdsourcing model. One of my audience members said to me, look above this at this timestamp. Look above the letter E in the harvest sign at 2:17 in this footage.
Right.
And tell me, does this look weird? So what I did was I took that footage into Lightroom.
Oh, right.
And I did an analysis based on the building to figure out, well, which surfaces are reflective and which surfaces are not reflective. And if we see this thing extending beyond what's a reflective surface, it wouldn't be a reflection. So that was the analysis that I did that kind of confirmed that this was something beyond just a reflection, beyond we're seeing a reflection of something in the windows. So that became kind of a pivotal element. What that meant was that the testimony from Clarissa's parents that was given on the confessionals, that they heard something about 10 minutes before 10.
Now, Clarissa is the woman who called into a radio show and said, as I recall, this might be verbatim, I swear to God, I saw people hanging out of the helicopter shooting.
Not quite verbatim, but that's the
something
gist
close
of it.
to that. She did swear to God, didn't she?
And I think she said, I swear, yeah. And there's a video on the Johnny Hoover channel called Clarissa, Witness Something. So you can search the channel for Clarissa and you'll find it. So that's her testimony. But the thing that connects Bill Gates to the pandemic and the Las Vegas shooting here, right? So the pandemic, he kind of got himself engaged in this with this vaccine investments and interests and all that stuff. But his tangential involvement or connection, I should say, not involvement, his tangential connection to the Las Vegas shooting is or was as a part owner of the Four Seasons Hotel. And the thing that most people or many people aren't aware of is that the Four Seasons Hotel occupied the same building as Mandalay Bay, beginning on floors 35. And Stephen Paddock's room was on 32. So if you go up from 32 to 33, 34, then 35 becomes the Four Seasons. It has different carpeting. It has different wallpaper. It has different lighting fixtures. It has different artwork. It has different lamps. The bedding is different. It's a different hotel, but the signage is around the back. So you have to go around the back side of the hotel to see where it says Four Seasons, or search. You can search in Google Earth for Four Seasons Las Vegas.
It totally took me not to where I wanted to be.
Interesting. Four Seasons Hotel, Las Vegas. Yeah.
Let's see if this works. Yeah, back up into the building. Huh.
Yeah, it should bring you around the back
It
side
doesn't.
entrance.
Yeah, there you go. Oh, look at that.
That's it. Yeah, so there's a backside entrance, and that's the entrance to the Four Seasons. So at the time of the Las Vegas shooting, the Four Seasons was 45% owned by Cascade Investments, Bill Gates' holding company. The other 45% was owned by Al-Walid bin Talal. And then 10% was owned by Isidore Sharp, the original founder of the Four Seasons. And this is an aspect of the story that for some reason was kept hush-hush. It's like, why didn't we hear anything about the Four Seasons guests upstairs?
Yeah.
Right. All right, so let's go to the next slide in the deck.
But there's one other interesting thing about
Sure.
what you're talking about there, which I can't remember if it was on our show that we spoke about it, but Al-Walid has sold his shares in, here it is. Al-Walid has sold his shares in the Four Seasons, but he sold it. Kingdom Holdings, the Saudi Arabian investment company controlled by Prince Al-Walid bin Talal, completed an 8.29 billion Saudi riyal deal to sell half its stake in the global hospitality company, the Four Seasons. And the thing is, he sold it to this FS Washington Acquisition Corporation, which we had determined separately is owned by Bill Gates. Why does he have one company owning part of it and another company owning another part of it? Why not just buy it all with one company? It seems weird.
I'm guessing it has to do with taxes, but go to my deck. New York Post covered the story. I think it's the next slide. So the New York Post covered the story and said, let me explain this for a second. There's going to be a pretty big reveal tonight, as I said, for our patrons on the Patron Only Hour, which begins in like 15 minutes. In April of 2019 and April of 2020, two pretty big life-changing things happened for me. So in April 2019, Jason came to Thailand.
Wow, that was 2019?
That was 3 years ago.
I got to get that video edited.
So April of 2019, Jason comes to Thailand. And that kind of, that was sort of a watershed moment. And we're going to talk about that when we get to our Patron Only Hour. April of 2020 was life-changing because that was the first time I spoke to Laura Ingraham. All right, so that was 2 years ago, April, right? So it's April now. So 2 years ago, I think in 2 weeks, right? So 2 weeks from now was 2 years ago that I first spoke to Laura Ingraham. And 3 years ago, a couple weeks from now, is when you came to visit me in Thailand. So maybe we'll get some of that footage ready for 2-3 weeks from now, which will be the 3 year. 3 years.
I don't want to talk about what's happening this weekend, but I'll talk to you after the show. Maybe I can try and.
Okay. Whatever. We got weeks. I mean, I'm talking about 2 minutes of footage.
It's it's 3 years.
All right. So April 2019, Jason Goodman comes to Thailand, right? Next slide. Let's go to our next thing. All right. I speak to Laura Ingraham for the first time, April 2020.
That's Windows on the World.
So this is for the audience who's not familiar with the backstory here. My first meeting with Bill Gates took place in the 1980s at Windows on the World. And I got to have dinner with Bill Gates, Steve Ballmer, and the chief information officers, the heads of IT for a bunch of big companies in New York, like New York Times, CBS News, ADP, on and on and on. The publishing companies like Simon & Schuster, companies like that. So big dinner, meet Bill Gates, meet Steve Ballmer, happens at Windows on the World, which ends up getting destroyed September 11th. Yeah. So this venue no longer exists, and this was my first meeting.
And everybody in there was killed. The workers, some people worked there for years.
Incinerated. Yeah, they were burned alive. Yeah. All right. So this is the first place. You can go to the next slide, show people another shot or two of this. So this is Windows on the World. This is where I meet Bill Gates. This is where I meet Steve Ballmer, have dinner with him. Steve Ballmer gives me noogies, and that's sort of the backstory. So this is my first introduction to Bill Gates, and this is in the 1980s. So now fast forward to the next slide, and my second run-in with Bill Gates was when my wife and I shared a bed with Bill and Melinda, and that was here. This is
now wait a minute. You told me this, but I forget who owns this. Somebody fancy, right?
Yeah, this is Richard Branson's Necker
Right.
Island. So I was a guest here. This only cost me airfare just to get here. I can't afford to stay like this, but a friend of mine was a very successful investment banker, and he had a birthday party and rented Necker Island and invited me as a guest. So my wife and I stayed in this is it. It's called Bali Low, and this is on Necker Island. Well, when we came and we arrived, they have you sign in to the guest book. And the people that had just signed out earlier that day, or excuse me, the day before we arrived, was Bill and Melinda Gates. And so I slept in the same bed as Bill and Melinda.
Probably stank.
I was kind of wary when I got down there. I was looking for dirt. I was looking for black socks behind the dresser, to tell you the truth, like behind the bed and stuff. So I was looking around thinking, did the guy just like throw his socks somewhere and nobody found it? And I'm going to find my Bill Gates dirty socks. And that'll be an interesting find. So it was a beautiful place. And this is where I got to, sleep in the same bed as Bill Gates, just not on the same night. One night later.
What's a hat? Oh, they give you a hat.
I think that's all that's left of Bill after Melinda is done with him. So is
the hat.
Yeah, I think that's all.
Well, it looks beautiful.
Oh, this is Richard Branson's place. This is where Keith Richards hangs out. This is, this is the place. It doesn't get any nicer than this. All right, so this, we talk about Bill Gates and his acquisition of the Four Seasons. This is the New York Post, right? So the New York Post covers the story
because he used something other than Cascade,
right? Well, it was some sort of a subsidiary that rolled up to Cascade, and the first story that we read kind of was trying to be coy, but New York Post covered it back then. So they cover the story. If you go up one photo in the deck, that's the I.M. Pei designed Four Seasons in New York City on 57th Street. This is one of the most spectacular lobbies you're ever going to see. This is, just from an architectural standpoint, one of the most beautiful buildings I think I've ever seen or been inside of.
Wow.
57th Street, New York City. Maybe next time you and Charles do a walk and talk, you can
swing by
inside. Yeah, well, Bill Gates owns it, so.
That's a good idea. Right? Why does he want to be in the hotel business?
Well, we're going to talk about that. So, for example, this past week, or just before last week's show, I think it was last week on Thursday, Taylor Hawkins died, the drummer from Foo Fighters.
Oh, yeah.
And
did they decide what that was?
I'm not sure, but if you go to take a look at the story, you'll find that Taylor Hawkins died where? At the Four Seasons.
Jason Bonham says that his death brought back memories of his father, John Bonham, who was the drummer for Led Zeppelin.
Well, Jason Bonham looks like he's older than me. Damn.
Probably is, right?
It's crazy.
Well,
I saw his dad. I saw his dad live.
Wow.
Crazy.
But anyway, did they? Oh, what's Sammy Hagar doing with those guys? But did they figure out what the cause of death was?
I don't know, but I know that he died at the Four Seasons in. I think they were in Colombia, in Bogota, or Medellin, or some sort of hope. Yeah, so 10 substances in the system. None of them
unusual.
But guy was an incredible talent, though. I mean, remarkable talent. In fact, I featured some of his drumming in one of my videos. Just I'm a big fan, so real sad to
Forgive my
see him go.
ignorance, but isn't the Foo Fighters the guys who remained after what's his name got
Dave
shot?
Grohl. Dave Grohl.
But
So yeah, Dave Grohl used to be the drummer
but the
for
Courtney Love shot what's his name, Nirvana guy,
Mhm. Mhm.
Kurt Cobain. Wasn't that somehow Foo Fighters?
Foo Fighters is the band that started after the Kurt Cobain tragedy.
Right, but that's his old band.
It's Dave Grohl's new band. I don't think Chris Novoselic is in the band. Chris Novoselic just kind
I
of
don't know
retired.
that much about it.
Yeah. So, but Taylor Hawkins dies in Bogota at the Four Seasons Hotel.
Well,
that's where he was. So, again, you wanted to know why
10
is Bill Gates
substances
interested
in his system.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So, which one was the straw that broke the camel's back? I couldn't tell you.
Benzodiazepine. Whoa, antidepressants. THC. We probably had orange juice also, but I don't think that necessarily did anything to him.
We're gonna have to, yeah. Again, very tragic. I think he was just 50 years old, so very sad.
Stay away from the
All right,
benzodiazepine.
We're going to look at this whole Bill Gates Four Seasons connection thing. We'll take a closer look at that. I'm going to explain a little bit more about my connection to him and this reveal that Jason knows a little bit about. Let's go. Yeah, let's take a quick look before we have to go. We have one more minute, I think. We have a minute or so.
Yeah.
All right. So let's just take a quick look in Thailand. It's getting worse again. So Thailand right now, if you look at the red and the white, again, more cases and more people are dying again. And this doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Now, it's still Thailand has fewer people dead than Ohio, and Thailand has 70 million people. So Thailand has about the same population as France. And Thailand has fewer people dead than Ohio. But things are bad right now, and it's hard to explain why. There's really not a good rationale for that. So let's go to the next slide.
Nobody's asking. No one's paying attention. It's not, they're sort of like making excuses for Kamala Harris to like make out with Ketanji Brown without a mask on or whatever, and then yell at Peter Doocy about it.
Well, again, as long as the news continues to get sprinkled with tragedy after tragedy, I think the most recent one was a bombing at a train station, and you see the missile lying out in the middle of the field and whatever, and the missile looks like it's big enough to take out an entire city, not just part of a train station, because the missile's about 30 feet long or something like that. And, so anyway, we just looked at Thailand. We looked at what's happening with COVID. And I thought, well, let me just check at the World Health Organization. Let's go to the WHO, the World Health Organization, and take a look at Thailand.
What is this showing you here?
This is how many influenza specimens we've seen in the past year in Thailand. So
why is it all on one day?
1 week. Yeah. So in 1 week, there were a whole bunch. And then there were no more, and that was that.
It's weird.
So there were
seems wrong.
Right. Seems anomalous, right? This is doesn't seem organic or natural. So the fact that there would be no influenza in Thailand for a year, for the past year, that just seems a little bit strange, right? So let's go one more slide, and then I think we have to go patron only.
People are concerned about the boosters.
Yeah. All right, so here you've got, I think this is, what are we looking at? Can you zoom in there? Is that Beijing, China? Yeah, so China's up. So according to Johns Hopkins, China's up to 13,000 people dead, but there still aren't 10 dead in Beijing, and there still aren't 10 dead in Shanghai. But the news story is telling you that Shanghai is in heavy lockdown, heavy lockdown.
Right.
They're shipping people
food,
off.
They said.
Right. Can't get food, shipping people off to COVID concentration camps, but there aren't 10 people dead. How come the stories keep skipping over that part of the story? How do you talk about you can't get food and they're going to the camps but there's only 9 people dead there, or 7 people. Go to the next slide. I think the next slide is Shanghai. Take a peek. Yeah, that's Shanghai, isn't it? Or is that South Korea? That's
South Korea.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we'll look at Shanghai more closely. We're kind of out of time here, John, but we'll look at Shanghai more closely in just 4 minutes when we carry
Big
on with
reveal.
the sponsor exclusive segment on subscribestar.com/I am John Cullen, patreon.com/I am John Cullen, and subscribestar.com or patreon.com/crowdsource the truth. Don't miss this. It's a great time to sign up. We're still at the beginning of the month, and John has got a lot to tell us. I think I know. I know,
Oh,
obviously, but people are going to want to hear this reveal
This is
about
huge.
Bill
This is
Gates
huge.
and the Four Seasons and the whole thing.